Go ahead and open up your Bibles to Genesis chapter 19. If I seem a bit groggy, I do apologize. I'm still struggling with this allergy thing. And my wife won't let me have caffeine. No matter how sad a face I made to her tonight, she wouldn't let me have any caffeine. So you pray for me. I'll make it, but you pray for me. The Lord might soften up her heart and allow me to have a little caffeine. No, it's not good for me. Certainly be better for me to stay awake. She did offer me to buy me one for free if I fell asleep in this sermon. I don't know how I'd do it, but I do like coffee, so you might see me try, I guess. Genesis 19, verses 1 through 11. Though unorthodox, this is entitled House Guest Part 2. I think it's probably been a month and a half since we did Part 1. It's definitely been a whole chapter ago because that lines up parallel with the beginning of Genesis 18, but you'll see why as we get into it. Genesis 19, starting in verse 1 and reading through verse 11. And there came two angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, Behold now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet, and ye shall rise up early and go on your ways. And they said, Nay, but we will abide in the street all night. Verse 3, And he pressed upon them greatly, and they turned in unto him, and entered into his house. And he made them a feast, and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. And before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. And they called unto Lot, and said unto him, Where are the men which came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know him. Verse 6, And Lot went out at the door unto them, and shut the door after him, and said, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. Behold, now I have two daughters, which I have not known man. Let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you, and do ye to them as is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing, for therefore came they under the shadow of my roof. Verse 9, And they said, Stand back. And they said again, This one fellow came in to sojourn, and he will needs be a judge. Now will we deal worse with thee than with them. And they pressed sore upon the man, even Lot, and came near to break the door. But the men put forth their hand, and pulled Lot into the house to them, and shut to the door. And you might mark next to verse 10, the men here aren't Sodomites, aren't the men of the city. These are the angels, the two visitors that are house guests of Lot's. These men put forth their hand, and pulled Lot into the house to them, and shut to the door. And they, same men, smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. What we approach now is a very important lesson. And in my notes, I have important lesson for us today. This lesson would have been just as important in the 1900s, the 1800s, the 1700s, and so on. Today is the day that we live in. Today is the day that we're charged to redeem. And this wickedness is still abounding. This wickedness is now in our commercials. This wickedness is run rot through our land. And seemingly has no end. I want to caution before we get too much into the sermon, because there will be those that listen and say, this pastor hates homosexuals. I want you to understand, we should despise sin in all of its forms. Not just homosexuality, and not just all of her harlot daughters, the offshoots that come with it, trans and so on and so on and so on and so on. We certainly shouldn't hate the individuals involved. That old adage of hate the sin, not the sinner, and all that. But we should despise all forms of sin. Lies, cheating, drunkenness, wantonness, whatever it might be, lasciviousness, all of these things we should despise. We serve a new master now. We have a Father in heaven. We have an intercessor that stands before the Father in heaven, that ever stands, continuing to stand for our benefit, for our cause. It's easy to go into Genesis 19 and shout things towards gay people. But understand, this sin still runs rampant today. This sin and the case here of Lot, there certainly isn't going to be a lesson saying how Lot should have stopped homosexuality. What I hope to bring out in this lesson was what Lot turned his back on. What worship, or his version of worship, and we'll talk about that more in a moment, what it led to. Because we know that Lot was saved by 300 or so men that served under Abraham. Men that were ready and able and went to fight willingly. Ready, able, and willing to fight. And they succeeded. We know that the Lord had a heart for Lot, as we'll see in a little bit later in this sermon. Lot couldn't have stopped homosexuality any more than your pastor is going to be able to stop it here in 2022. But we are called to watch and be ever ready, to preach or dispute against sin. We're called to live a holy life. We're called to lead in a manner in which these things are recognized and those fires are put out quickly. We're called to lead our homes so that our children look up to us. Not because we are the be-all, end-all, but because we know the Father. Because we know something this world doesn't. H. Boyce Taylor wrote, God's call always means a call out of as well as a call into or to something. A call to separation from the world and to consecration to God. And that's what I hope our focus is by the end of this message, our focus is on this, is that God's call is always out of something and to something else. Where did these guests come from? This was initially my final point in House Guest Part 1 a few months back, and I decided to push it out because there's not a whole lot we can say about it, but there's some things that I want us to see. Where did these guests come from? There's no proof as to any means of travel for our Lord and these angels, even back in Genesis 18, except that they approached the tent and that they approached Sodom. We saw that the Lord departed at the end of chapter 18, and it was just about as vague. How did he part? Did he disappear? Did he go into the air? How did he go from Abraham? All we know is that he went. The angels arrive at the gate of Sodom in the next chapter, this chapter, and it sounds as though they came to town from another place. Did they walk? Potentially. Either way, we know that they came from Abraham, as the Lord said that they would, and they went to these cities. And keep in mind, again, that there's more than just Sodom and Gomorrah involved here. They were with Abraham in the heat of the day, and they arrive here at Sodom in the evening. Same day, I'm not sure that we know, but they don't arrive during the day. They arrive in the evening. Some proof text, Genesis 18:22, and the men turned their faces from thence and went toward Sodom, but Abraham stood yet before the Lord. The very first verse of our text tonight, and there came two angels to Sodom at even, or evening, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. Hebrews 13:3 says that we are to remember them that are in bonds as bound with them, and them which suffer adversity, as being yourselves also in the body. This is in connection with the other part of Hebrews that we've quoted in the past about remembering those house guests, remembering those visitors as though we are entertaining angels unawares. It's tied to it in that we are to remember others, as we said in our prayer here this morning. We don't know what condition they're in, lost or saved, generally speaking. We don't know the condition of their day, whether they've just lost a loved one, whether they just received a death sentence of their own, such as cancer and so on, or whether they just hit the lottery. Usually there's a whole lot more telltale signs for the last one than you'll find for the other ones. Secondly, I want to look at the elements of this event. We should take notice right away that the majority of this event, just like the arrival of these two men, takes place at night. Whereas the visitors, as I said, came to Abraham in the heat of the day. They were there in the daylight. He was ready to serve. He was ready to entertain. He was ready to host. And you can feel it, as we'll see in a moment. There's a different pacing to how Abraham treated these guests and how Lot treats these guests. And I tried to convey it in the reading, but I'll have another shot here in a moment. We should notice that this haste on Lot's part was probably for good reason. And we can talk in a minute about him sitting at the gate, but he was well aware of what took place on the streets of Sodom. He was well aware of what his neighbors wanted to do to these visitors. And though it be disgusting, we need to make sure that we understand. They weren't looking to play poker or euchre, friends. They wanted to know them intimately. They wanted to rape these house guests. And the reason for that, as we've discussed before, as we see in verse 9, is that they felt judged by their very presence. There's two strangers in town. They don't belong here, they might say. They wanted to make them known. They wanted to make themselves known. Look at the difference between the haste of Abraham and the haste of Lot. If you'll turn back to Genesis 18, just want to spend a little bit of time on this so we can again kind of set the setting here. Genesis 18 verses 2 through 5, we see that the haste is on Abraham's part. If Clark was to come to my house and I were to say, hurry up and sit down and we'll get you some food, and then hurry up and wash your hands and get out, I put all the haste on Clark. But if I welcome him into my house and as soon as he's seated, I run to the kitchen and I run to Rebecca and we run to get the food ready so that he can rest and he can relax and he can enjoy his time there. It's two very different things. And we see that here. Abraham ran to meet them from the tent door, bowed himself toward the ground and said, "My Lord, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away. Take your time. Stay here, I pray thee, from thy servant. Let a little water, I pray you, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. And I will fetch a morsel of bread, and comfort ye your hearts. After that ye shall pass on. For therefore are ye come to your servant." And they said, "So do as thou hast said." And we're going to read the converse to that, which is Genesis chapter 19, verses 2 through 3, but it's almost the exact opposite. Before I move into that, again, notice Abraham's words. Everything towards the house guest is you relax, you come in, you tarry, you stay a while. He refers to himself as a servant. He basically makes clear that as long as you're willing to stay with me, I will take care of you. Your hearts will rest, you can relax, and you can go when you're ready. Lot, on the other hand, Genesis 19, verses 2 through 3, he says, these are his words, "Behold now." There's already urgency in the words immediately. "Behold now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet." And you're thinking, Pastor, you're adding all of this. There's a lot of short phrases separated by commas there, beloved. They're not periods. I believe that's how it's to be read. "Turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet, and ye shall rise up early and go on your ways." If I were to truly invite Clark over for you today, for a few nights, he's not going to hope that I want him to get up early and leave, generally speaking. That wouldn't be Southern hospitality. He'd say, "That Yankee made me get up early and get out of his house on Eastern time, nonetheless." And they said, "Nay, but we will abide in the street all night." And then Lot says, it says of Lot, he pressed upon them greatly. He pushed harder. Do this thing. Do it quickly. Get off the streets. Genesis 19, verses 6 through 7, "And Lot went out the door unto them, and shut the door after him, and said, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly." We see of Lot here a rush, a constant rush. And I think we can read into that it's a rush of a little bit of fear. Not fear of what will come to him, clearly not a fear of what will come to his daughters, but a fear of what will come to these house guests. Abraham's house was in order. He lived in a tent, but his house was in order. And why we mention that he lived in a tent, he wasn't setting up to stay here permanently. This was not his home. He was a pilgrim, a stranger in this land. His intention was to move forward, to move on from here. Why, oh why, wasn't that Lot's intention? We saw quite a few chapters back when they came out of Egypt that Lot set his tent towards Sodom. And really that was the last time we saw Lot in a tent. His only temporary housing was to get him to Sodom. If he is indeed speaking urgently here because of fear of what will come to these guests, or to just get them off the streets, or to even maybe prevent his neighbors from feeling judged by taking notice of these guests, why hadn't he moved on? Why hadn't he searched for the will of God? Why hadn't he made better decisions for his family, for his home? Of Abraham, we see that the elements of the world were not a threat to his home, but they definitely were to Lot's. And while we're asking these tough questions of Lot, we need to ask them of ourselves. Maybe some of us are in dangerous spots. Maybe some of us are entertaining things we should not be entertaining. Someday, if there's a book to be written about us, will it also say, why didn't they come out from there? Why didn't they cut out that entertainment? Why didn't they stop doing that with their spare time? Why didn't they curb their language? Why didn't they curb their attitudes? Why didn't they spend more time charitably? Not necessarily giving away money, but giving away love, giving away care and compassion for others. You see, even in Genesis 19, we can step on our own toes, can we not? We can see that it's easy for us to say Lot should have got out of there. Clearly, Lot knows there's danger there, but I think we've all had seasons, if we're not in one right now, in which we know we're not where we should be. We are in a dwelling place in Sodom, and we need to run from there. The Lord has a way of moving his people. We'll see at the conclusion of Genesis 19 how he does so for Lot. Here we see Lot separating himself from his guests as he goes out the door unto them, shuts the door after him, and says, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. Some host. He's immediately departed from the house, immediately separated himself from the guests to plead with those of the world to depart from him. If indeed we are entertaining angels unaware, I don't think we ought to be caught running back to the world to plead for anything. I think we should be prepared to entertain angels. Maybe we're unaware of it, but we should be prepared. The Lord says we will. The Lord, in what we read last time, the Lord says that you fed me when I was hungry, you gave me drink when I was thirsty, you healed me when I was wounded, and so on and so on and so forth. Speaking of the opportunities for which the elect of God had to care for angels. For us to indeed be prepared to do such a thing, we need to arm ourselves, as we talked on Sunday. We need to be putting on the spiritual armor every single day. We don't know when the next opportunity will present itself. We can assume, based on Lot's actions, that this was not the first visit of the men of Sodom to his home. Could you imagine such a thing? We probably could. We probably could. Tried to watch a baseball game through Hulu the other day. I don't know if that'll get us trouble for streaming since I said a brand name there, but tried to watch a baseball game, and Isaac and I, every commercial break, there was another guy dressed as a woman, or another, well, usually you don't see the ladies dressed as men. I don't know if they're just better at it these days, but it's almost always a man putting on the entourage or the impression or the image of a woman. Can we imagine? What if two angels came from a strange land today, and they somehow ended up here in Manatee, Mississippi, and they said, I'd like to stay with you. And you notice right away that they're sensitive to exposure to certain things. I think of the Jamaicans that Rebecca and Sister Michelle got to stay with a couple years back. And you know that their sensibilities are delicate, not that they're homosexual, but that they are guarded. They're guarded against wickedness. And how would you do that? They come into maybe the Kaiser's home and they say, I'd like to watch some American TV. And maybe Marcia has to say, no, I don't think that'd be a good idea. And they say, okay, I want to get on the Google and just read some local news. And Steve says, that's probably not a good idea. Couldn't we just talk for a while? Maybe there's a knock on the door. Your neighbor from across the street comes over. And Steve has to exit the house and beg them, come another time. Come another time. It's uncomfortable, this topic. But it's real. We are living it, beloved. Look at verse 8. This was Lot's response. As he's out there, as he's facing his neighbors, as he's facing those who want his guests, he says, behold, now I have two daughters. Two virgin daughters, two unmarried virgin daughters who have not known man. Let me, I pray you, and I know I pray you is not necessarily I worship you. He's asking for them to consider this, but it bothers me to read those words there. let me bring them out unto you. And do ye to them as is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing, for therefore came they under the shadow of my roof. There's a comparison made here of flesh and blood, daughters of Lot, that were apparently under that same roof that had no protection at all. They had no witness, as we'll see shortly. They didn't have a man of the household protecting them, guarding their sensibilities, guarding their hearts, attempting to clear up this wickedness, giving them an understanding of things from a godly perspective. Could you imagine if these men had gone for it, Lot coming in and saying, Delaney, Liviana, come here. Those little girls' faces. Yeah, Daddy. I'm going to give you to the Sodomites. What? We have house guests and they want them. And I can't let them have them. So I'm going to give you to our neighbors. Let me paint this picture more clearly. At the time that conversation would have been happening, we would have heard knocking on the door. We would have heard a violent struggle as they were seeking to break into the house. Maybe these girls are already screaming, Daddy, what's happening? What's happening out there, Daddy? It's going to be okay. I'm going to give you to them to pacify their rage, to pacify their lusts. Preacher, that's despicable. That's horrible. The longer we do nothing here in America, we're doing the same thing. I'm not going to make a case for you to go cancel some something plus subscriptions, but you ought to be guarding these little ones. This isn't a safe world to let little children play on the internet and watch videos. It never was. And this is what it has led to. The same place they already were in Sodom, Gomorrah, possibly those other cities as well. An intense wickedness in which there was no daddy to save them. No daddy who was willing to stand and say, this is wrong. As for me and my home, this shall not happen. Henceforth, we're leaving. I don't want to sit at the gate. I don't want to be involved in government politics. I don't want to be involved in the marketplace. I don't want to be a capitalist in this society. I want my children to grow up worshiping, honoring, and fearing God, not man. I don't want to be a coward and say that I will give you my virgin girls. I will give you my own flesh and blood. I will give to you, not even sell, give to you my children. Wake up, America. That's what we're doing. And the ones we're not giving away, we're slaughtering in the womb. This should make us cry. Not cry from anger at gay people, but cry at the wickedness that we continue to tolerate, embrace, and welcome into our homes. Is there no safe place, preacher? Not in this world. Get into the ark. There is no safe place. Elmo, Kermit, none of them can save us from this. It's already happening. The fact that we are where we are means that you're not going to stop it. You need to lead holy lives. You need to teach your children to fear the Lord. As Brother Hilly said today when he was teaching from this same text, that is the only place for which change is really going to come. And that is by the grace of God. We aren't going to change it. You aren't going to make the next Democratic or Republican presidential candidate want to. Quite honestly, most of them have been sellouts so far. And even under Trump, we were still killing babies. While it is valiant that Lot would want to see his guests protected, it is disgusting that he would sacrifice his daughters to do so. What of us today? Are we any different? What desperation must have come upon Lot to offer up his own children to the wicked imaginations of these men? Does he love them at all? Does he feel remorse at all for making them grow up in Sodom? We might look at his spot at the seat at the gate as an occupation for which he made a good income. Is that a good excuse to sell off your children? To give away your homes? I'm afraid that's how we got here. I'm afraid that at some point we decided it was more important for man and wife to work outside the home. It was more important for us to have that bigger house, 2 cars, all the sporting events, all of the date nights, all of the luxury cruises. And those things aren't necessarily evil in and of themselves. But how we attained it was by mom and dad leaving. Who watched the children? Who taught them? One of the first things they teach in public school is evolution. One of the very first things they teach, which makes sense, right? Because the first thing in the Bible is the opposite. The first thing in the Bible is the omnipotence of God who created the universe. And I think it was 1st or 2nd grade when they started planting the seeds for evolution. Millions of years ago. I think of that sitcom Friends that ran through the 90s. I'm gonna get us kicked off right away. I think of that sitcom. There were lesbian parents. There was sex before marriage. There was extramarital children, extramarital affairs. And oh, by the way, Ross was an archaeologist who remind us at least once a season that dinosaurs happened millions of years ago. Am I a conspiracy theorist? Or are these seeds being reinforced and reinforced and reinforced? I constantly recommend to folks to read George Orwell's books, 1984 and Animal Farm. And I read today that Animal Farm is being animated. Well, if you've ever read those books, that's not a kid's book. But if they make it into a kid's story, they're changing it. It's more of a commentary on what we're going through right outside those doors. Go read it. It's a quick read. You might not enjoy it. It'll probably make you cry, especially 1984. Abraham's wife was ready to serve. The butter had been prepared, the meat ready to be slain, as we discussed when we went through those portions of Genesis 18. It was as if he was ready for his holy guest to come at any moment. But Lot seems frantic. He seemed unprepared. He was not found watching. And oh, by the way, where was Mrs. Lot? It's as though she hadn't been taught to help take care of the family. We don't see where she was going to put up a fight to even keep the daughters. Do what you got to do. Game's on. We got any more kids left to give away? Turn over to 2 Peter chapter 2. 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 6 through 9 says, and Peter writing, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them with an overthrow. Spoiler alert, this is coming at the end of this chapter that we're reading. Making them an ensample unto those that after should live ungodly. Wait a minute. Does this mean God knew that sodomy would be a thing that was going to stick around? Yeah. He knew. Can you imagine? Verse 7, and delivered just Lot. But look at what it says about Lot. Look what it says about the result of him sitting at the gate. He was vexed with filthy conversation of the wicked. Vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked. For that righteous man dwelling among them and seeing and hearing vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. Here's the thing, before we go as far as to say that, Lot was just a bad dad, Lot was unprepared, Lot couldn't get it all figured out, Lot was weak, Lot was a coward, which I think I've already said tonight. I want us to understand that this would have happened to any one of us in the same circumstances. This word vexed means to tire down with toil or evils. And Peter even says there, it was day after day after day. So tomorrow you get this wonderful job offer. And sure, it's selling pornography, but I mean, what harm does it really cause? People are going to read pornography anyway, right? And you take it because your family really needs that money. Livy hasn't eaten in weeks, and Isaac's going to be driving soon. So you take the job because you need the money. And maybe you don't read pornography. Maybe you never read pornography. But day after day, you're being tired down with toils, worn out, beloved, with evils, over and over and over and over. And it may not even really lead to a psychological snap. It could just be that your sensibilities are so dulled that you don't come home and worship in your home anymore. Too tired. Just go to bed. Just say your prayers. Just leave the room. Beloved, it happens. It happens today. How many of us are that busy with the things the world has to offer? A lot of us are busy. If I asked you to raise your hand and you were busy, Derek and I would put our hands up first, but everybody else would be right behind us. We're all busy. How much of that is serving the world? How much of that busyness is wearing down our very souls? I tell you, when I looked up the meaning of vexed today, it broke my heart. Because I can remember seasons in which to get the promotion, we gave up more time. To get the promotion, one of us had to be gone at night. One of us had to be gone during the morning. One of us had to be gone in the afternoon. To get the promotion, somebody had to go to daycare. To get the promotion, and so on, and so on, and so on. And it's really right after they teach evolution, to be honest with you, you have to make a decision. Are you going to college? You going to college? You don't want to be one of those deadbeats that doesn't go to college, do you? You going to college? Oh, you're going to college. Let's put you on the AP track. Let's give you all these hard courses. And I don't know about Rebecca, but it was about 8 to 10 years of college, essentially, because you had to learn all the college stuff before you got to college to learn all the college stuff. You had to learn all the college stuff to be accepted into the college, which is ironic because you're paying the bill. It seems like I should be accepting them. But at the end of the day, you're broke, you're in debt, and you just have to keep taking that next promotion and the next promotion and the next promotion. What is it that the financials say? He who is slave to the lender. This is how we get there. Our souls have been vexed by the almighty dollar. Our souls have been vexed by the next big opportunity. Our souls have been vexed by the idea that our name would mean something. What's Will Smith's name mean now? I've read so many articles about actors giving excuses for how busy he is and how overworked he is. And honestly, he was the best example I could think of. What does his name bring to mind right now? There's only one name that holds value in this world, and that is the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. And his value is the purchased souls of all the elect of God. My name doesn't hold the value of my own soul. And there's nothing you can put before it, elder, or after it, DDS, whatever it might be. I think mine's BA. Won't matter. Adds no value whatsoever. All that tells folks is I know how to take out loans. Fourthly, and these last 2 points are really connected, what was the result of Lot's worship, or the lack thereof, on his home? Whether or not you do Bible devotions, or just times of prayer, or nothing at all, it is a type of worship. If I were to sit down with my children every night and watch whatever sport's on, I'm teaching them worship. I'm teaching them that at such and such clock, we're going to do this, and we're going to do it together. And we're all going to, very similar to how it is in here, face the front and watch that lit up box. We might not want to admit it, but that's worship. And in worship, whatever comes on in between the plays, commercials, whatever comes on during the commercials during our movies, our TV shows, even if they're educational, we're teaching our children, our spouses, that is an acceptable risk for worship. So the results of Lot's worship we see in verses 12 through 14 of Genesis 19. And this is the results of his worship on his home. And the men said unto Lot, Hast thou here any besides? son-in-law and thy sons and thy daughters, and whatsoever thou hast in the city, bring them out of this place, for we will destroy this place, because the cry of them is waxen great before the face of the Lord. And the Lord hath sent us to destroy it. And Lot went out. Doesn't seem very surprised. Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-law. I'd like to point out where he went to find them. They weren't sitting next to him. They weren't sitting at the feet of him. He had to go out. Did he go outside? Were they with the Sodomites banging on the door that were blinded by the angels? He went out and spake unto his son-in-laws, which married his daughters, and said, Up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his own son-in-laws. He seemed like a joke. He seemed almost as though he was trying to get a laugh. Get out of here! There's a storm coming. This city's not going to survive. God's going to destroy it. God, who creates at the infinite most level, to the highest possible conceivable level and beyond, when he destroys something, he destroys it completely. When we read about the flood with Noah, it wasn't a local flood. It was a global flood in which 8 souls survived. And that was it. Lot would have heard that story. Lot goes out and says, Up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. I can't pick apart his sermon. It's right on the money, what he just heard. He went right to the audience he was told to go to. He delivered the message faithfully that he was told to deliver, but he was not believed, beloved. You see, getting folks to believe your message, they got to believe the messenger. Lot couldn't be trusted with this message. They weren't going to follow him anywhere. As we see from further reading, Lot had lost his testimony with his family. And it could be from fear that he was going to just give them away. His sons perceived his warning cry of the Lord destroying the city as a joke. Good one, Dad. That's a good one. You go back inside now. Who is this God you speak of, Pops? I thought God was a God of love. Uh-oh, that one was real. Pastor wasn't joking with that one, was he? I thought that God was a God of love. You wait till one day your children say that to you. Mine won't. Lord willing, if they paid any attention, that won't be their response. Surely he will not destroy anyone. Were they so far removed from Babylon? Were they so far removed from the flood? Were they so far removed from great-great-great-great-great-grandpa Adam that they'd lost sight of the stories of paradise? Lost sight of memory of the wrath of God? Note the dangers of a bad testimony, especially before your family, that in the time in which they need to believe you most, they won't. Not only must we allow and encourage our children to be functioning adults, but we are charged with providing them with an understanding of who God is. And we don't have to like it. We're charged with that responsibility. The blood of Lot's children are on his hands. Couldn't the angels, ask yourself, couldn't the angels have gone and warned those sons-in-law? Couldn't the angels have just removed all of them? Gone to the daughters, grabbed Lot's wife wherever she was, and just gotten out of there right away? Lot was sent with that message because Lot was unprepared. Lot was not found watching. Lot was not worshiping in his home. Lot was not living right. Lot was not where he should have been. Notice also back in verse 3 that it was Lot who made the feast and baked the unleavened bread, not his wife. Providentially, this is the first mention of leaven in the Bible. It ties in very well with Sunday for us. Sarah was hastened back in Genesis 18 by Abraham to make cakes upon the hearth in Genesis 18:6. Lot's wife is not even referenced. Is it because she would not comply? Because perhaps she had never been taught or led by her husband? She might have not even known what leaven was. Before coming to a Baptist church, I'd never heard of it, in case you thought I was being funny. Lest they hear, how would they know? It is symbolic, of course, that this unleavened bread be made available here. Leaven, as many of us know, is a picture of decay, a picture of corruption. It is involved in the fermentation process. It was not to be present in spiritual fellowship, in type or in practice. It's almost as though this was brought to Lot's mind, ironically, if you'll allow me to say that, and that it should have enabled him to recognize, my home is filled with leaven. I am the leaven. I've done nothing to prevent it. If I just throw out a loaf of Wonder Bread on Sunday and call it unleavened and bless it like the Catholics do, it'll still be Wonder Bread. And you'll all wonder why you called me. Beloved, we have to prepare. We have to be prepared. If Rebecca didn't have a recipe for unleavened bread and we tried to look it up Sunday morning, I would be irate, and you should be too. We have to prepare for that meal. If I came on Sunday and said, I don't have anything, but let's just read. Men will just take turns. We'll just go around and we'll just read from the Bible. You'd be disappointed. You came for a meal. You came to be fed. This was likely the first time in a long time or ever that anyone had requested or prepared an unleavened meal for anyone. And it shows. My last point, and I'll go through it quickly, is the results of Lot's worship on his community. There was no fear of the Lord in these men. Based on Lot's insistence in the text, both with his guests and with the men of Sodom, he appeared to know the dangers that city had. He appeared to know exactly what they meant, whereas I have to define what it means that they wanted to know these guests. Lot would have known exactly what that meant. Notice he didn't offer sons. He offered daughters. He knew what they wanted to do, and they were going to do it to men or women, whoever came out of that house. It is almost unbelievable to read the account of how wicked this city was if we weren't living it. What is this great wickedness that Lot is trying to spare his guests from in verse 7? Look at those words again, and I'll go quickly, but we're looking at verse 7. All people from every quarter, both old and young, called unto Lot, bring them out unto us, that we may know them. Not please bring them out. Get them out here. It was like a welcome ceremony. We rape our guests here on the first night. Any hotel that advertised that, you wouldn't stay, would you? The Lord knew Lot was where he was. The Lord sent these two angels. And again, instantaneously, he could have been removed. But the level and degree for which his soul had been vexed was being revealed to him in it might seem fast, but probably a very painful, slow manner for a Christian. You ever had one of those moments where you're being punished or you're being embarrassed for not living how you should, and man, those moments seem to last forever? A lot like this sermon, you're thinking. It just goes and goes and goes. It doesn't seem to pass at all. That's probably what this experience was like for Lot. They were seeking to rape and likely murder these supposed men, who we know to be angels, who were guests in Lot's home. These were not sins practiced in secret, but openly. Old and young, people from every quarter. It's as if the word spread like wildfire. Party at Lot's house. A community that can share news that quickly sure would have benefited from the gospel, would it not? If only somebody could have identified an opportunity to talk about God and see that spread like wildfire, flipping the world upside down. But Lot never found the need. This is that very grievous sin that was spoken of by the Lord back in Genesis 18:20. We see today entire months in America dedicated to sodomy. This same grievous wickedness. It's a funny thing about America. When we name a month after it, the kids learn about it. Can you imagine being in school right now? Well, the gay pride is happening. The great gay pride parade. What's that mean? They're happy? No. As the teacher in Florida might explain in vivid detail, this is what it means. We have teachers that aren't getting laughed out of our courtrooms, that want to give explicit details about their sexual encounters with their lovers of the same sex over the weekend to their classes. Let me say that first part again. They're not getting laughed out of our courthouses. There's a time in this nation they would have been ashamed to even think about it. But the pressure's on now in these final days. And it's not just the radical left trying to see what they can get away with. This is Satan proving his domain. This is Satan proving his control and his authority. While we're so worried about what the thing in the hand is going to be, what it is we won't be able to live without and buy without, he's spreading sin just like Sodom, like wildfire. And so many of our neighbors, so many of our children perhaps, are saying, party at Lot's house. Party at Lot's house. Young and old. I think that's in there for us in 2022 because we're convinced it's generational, aren't we? It's these doggone millennials, I tell you. No, it's not. No, it's not. Do your research. This has been going on for a long time. And it's not millennials. It's both old and young, from every quarter, rich and poor. We've given our children away. Gay liberation movements, political organizations, religious societies, and it's not just among the radicals. What warnings might Lot have for us today? What warnings should we find in the fate of his wife and his neighbors? Read with me in Romans chapter 1. Romans chapter 1, verses 18 through 32. You'll have to bear with me. I have to finish this sermon. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them. For God hath showed it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. If you're looking at that in your Bible, you ought to mark it. Why should you give the Gospels to these that we might have allowed our hearts to be hardened against? Because there will be no excuse. They won't be able to go to God and say, I didn't know. It is our calling right now to give them and show them and illustrate for them the grace of God, that they might be saved. To give them the general call, the gospel, and the experience that we've had with it, so that they are without excuse, because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like a corruptible man, and to birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of God into a lie, and worshipped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this cause God gave them up unto vile affections, for even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature. And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one toward another. Men with men working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error which was meet. Even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind, to do those things which are not convenient, being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable, unmerciful, who knowing the judgment of God, that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. Dr. Henry Morris said this descent into degeneracy, both ancient and modern, is caused first of a rejection of God as creator and sovereign, equating ultimate reality and responsibility with the natural world, that evolution thing. And he continues on, he says, in whatever specific form this type of philosophy may appear in a given generation, it is fundamentally nothing but evolutionary naturalism and secular humanism. No matter how impressive may be its scientific and philosophic trappings, underneath it is rebellion and against the Creator, and it always leads sooner or later to gross moral depravity. We should note that even the offer of Lot's daughters did not satisfy the sodomite mob. Sadly, it made them even madder. The caution I think we should hear from that in 2022 is it's not that they just want to be legally recognized as married. Why do they even want marriage? God created that. They want to rebel against God. They want to embarrass Christians, not that it would hurt our pride, but that it would hurt our testimony. They want to get us angry. There'll probably be calls and letters from this very sermon. You hate gay people. No, I don't. I was a thief and a liar, and I wasn't gay, but I was a sinner through and through. Paul was the chief of sinners, and though he wasn't gay, he would have had compassion on any other sinner that came to him or that he came to. And that's what we're called to do as well. This is a despicable sin. But notice Abraham didn't judge Sodom for it. God did. We aren't here to judge this sin. We're here to disciple. We're here to preach the gospel. They felt judged by Lot's refusal to allow them access to his guests. What influence did he have here? Was he known for any sort of religious influence at all? He didn't fall back on it. He didn't say, whoa, guys, these could be men of God. Remember, he didn't seem so surprised that the Lord gave these two men a message to destroy the city. So maybe he knew, but he didn't rely on it. He never uttered God's name once, I would imagine. They're not going to understand it now. What an opportunity Lot had, which was likely, based on my math, about 13 years ago. What an opportunity he had when Abraham and the 318 or so soldiers delivered them. As they were returned to their homes once again that had been ravaged, and neighbor beside neighbor was rebuilding their homes because he wasn't living in a tent, remember? For 13 years, he could have said, God did that. Yeah, it was my uncle, but God used him in a mighty way. Did you know that God delivered us? That he brought us out of the captivity of those northeastern kings? Do y'all remember a few years back when God delivered us? Man, he was good. They should have been so annoyed with Lot giving God the glory. And maybe none would have been saved, which is likely because they were all destroyed. But if he had uttered God's name in this moment, in this hour, they would have known what he was talking about. And I reckon there would have been unleavened bread in his home. And I reckon he wouldn't have been so eager to give his children away. I want to reckon even further, because Yankees don't know when reckoning ends. They would have moved, beloved. They wouldn't have still been there. This is the ultimate outcome of having a compromising relationship with the world. Utter destruction. This is the ultimate outcome. Hear me now. I know Lot's not in the room, so this message must be for us. This is the ultimate outcome of having a compromising relationship with this world. Can't we all just get along? Sure, give them the gospel. See how long it lasts. We're not called to embrace these sins, entertain these sins, support these sins in any way. Not just homosexuality, any sins. Come out from among them. Be ye separate. Do not suffer any appearance of the evil one at all. The house guest angels themselves had to deliver Lot from the hands of his neighbors by rendering them blind. There were 3 deliverances since Lot turned his tent toward Sodom. Lot's first deliverance was during the war from the northeastern kings. The second deliverance was this one from his neighbors. The blindness would have been similar to what we see in 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 18, which I referenced last fall, when the Syrian army was left confused so that they could not identify where they were. Elisha caused that one. And that these neighbors could no longer find the door. The door didn't move. The door didn't change. They couldn't find it anymore. It was as if they had either forgotten where the door was or how a door worked. They were blinded to its usefulness. And the third deliverance is forthcoming. The last note I put in here, and I apologize it went so long, but I guess I got fired up on this one. My last note on here is the 5 cities I keep alluding to, so I have to tell you this. The 5 cities in the plain which the Lord had set to judge. Zor, Z-O-A-R, was the 5th, which we'll see next time, Lord willing. This was spared because of Lot. Deuteronomy 29, verse 23 says, "And the whole land thereof is brimstone and salt and burning, that is not sown, nor beareth, nor any grass groweth therein, like the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah and Zeboam, which the Lord overthrew in his anger and in his wrath." May the Lord prepare our hearts and minds to bear witness of the judgment that lies ahead in this study and its similarities to what lies ahead for modern man.